Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and today I'm pleased to welcome Bob Sanasevere to the Long Ship. Bob's a longtime St. Paul Pioneer Press sports columnist, and you can hear him on the KQRS morning show every day, as well as Sports Radio 105 The Ticket in the Twin Cities. Bob, thanks for joining us today, and how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's my pleasure. Anyone who's listening that's in Minnesota knows we have a little bit of a nip in the air. We just can't get away from this frigid weather. But I'm in a warm office, so I'm doing good today.
Good. That's the way it should be in the wintertime, especially when you're up north. Well, Bob, with all your roles in the various media outlets, at first I thought you were simply the hardest working man in sports journalism, but then I realized you have 5 children and might be looking for a 4th job to help them pay for college. Do you need us to spread the word that you're seeking a 9 p.m. to midnight shift to help you make the ends meet?
Well, let me ask this question. How do you guys pay and you have any openings? The way I look at it, I still have 3 jobs. I am on the KQ Morning Show. I'm on 105 The Ticket with Mike Morris, former Viking, who many of your listeners are certainly know, best long snapper in NFL history, according to a number of, actually, Mike has shown me, because people have sent to him, websites that say he is the epitome of what a long snapper should be, 13 years in the league, and we're having a great time doing that. But I also write a daily blog for TwinCities.com, which is the Pioneer Press's website. So I've still kept myself fairly busy with things. And my wife, we have 5 kids and a lot of horses. So, she runs our farm, and we have a little boarding facility. So I guess technically I help her with that. So that's 4 jobs there. And I'm sure I can come up with others if I just stopped and thought about it. But I try not to think about it that much, because as long as I get my 4 or 5 minutes of sleep at night, I'm good.
Well, we'll keep on sending at least the 4 or 5 job listings we get every once in a while in case you want to add to what you do already.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, are you ready to talk Minnesota Vikings?
Absolutely.
Well, Bob, as a member of the sports media, how difficult is it to do your job when you had a couple of past coaches like Brad Childress and Leslie Frazier who give so little information in their press conferences?
Frankly, the coach that I had the most difficult time with was Denny Green, because from the outset, Green and I did not hit it off, probably because I was the very first columnist or writer critical of him. And the first thing I was critical of, as a matter of fact, it would have been this week, his first season. He took all the coaches from the previous staff, from Jerry Burns' staff to the Senior Bowl, and then fired 2 of them, Tom Batta and John Michaels, at the Senior Bowl, and then sent them home. Why you would bring these men to the Senior Bowl to fire them is beyond me. So I criticize that, particularly in the case of Michaels, who's been a long-time assistant to both Bud Grant and Jerry Burns, and deserved more respect than that. And after that, obviously Denny read the press clippings, and I never would go to Denny and say, do you have a minute, or ask for time alone or on the side. I did that with Brad Childress, and I did that with Leslie Frazier, and both were very accommodating. And frankly, the thing a lot of people don't realize about Childress, he had a pretty good sense of humor that it sort of it didn't come out a lot, but it was sort of a biting sense of humor. And I enjoyed talking to him, one-on-one, and I frankly enjoyed talking to Leslie, too, one-on-one. What I would do is I did something called Questions with Bob for the Pioneer Press. So every Monday and sometimes on Wednesday, I would pull him aside and do a Q&A with him, because you can't have questions with Bob if the questions aren't asked by me.
Sure.
So he was always very accommodating. And Leslie, and I'm sure you've heard other people say this, he was probably one of the nicest coaches I've ever dealt with. And when people ask about Leslie, the word that keeps coming up is gentleman, because he truly was what you would consider a gentleman in any facet of life. My favorite coach, which you haven't asked, but I'll tell you, was Jerry Burns, because he's just a character. I mean, I'm not sure if Mick and Rocky was patterned after Jerry Burns, or if Jerry Burns was patterned after the Mick. I'm thinking the Mick was patterned after Jerry Burns, and Burgess Meredith had to see a clip of Jerry Burns and decided that's the guy I want to be like in Rocky.
Probably so, but I'm guessing that Burgess Meredith had to tone it down a little bit.
Well, actually, there wasn't so much profanity in any of the Rockies he appeared in.
Be able to spit nails, kid. Like the guy says, you're going to eat lightning and you're going to crap thunder. You're going to become a very dangerous person.
He could let it rip.
Well, we talked to Darren Nelson, and he recalled the tirade that Burns had after a win that the Vikings had. It's a real famous clip on YouTube, and people still get a kick out of that. And you have to realize, from talking to Jerry Burns or hearing from him, how nice of a guy he really is, how much of a character he is.
Great guy. And actually, it's the clip, I believe, against the Rams that you're talking about. And they did win that game. And if you, I think it's on the clip. The last question I asked, and I said, "You won this game, didn't you?" Because he was just go. That was the one where I think he defended Schnelker, and I think he talked about Alfred Anderson, who ran out of his shoe.
Yep.
And
a hell of a game. And let me say something. As long as I'm in this f***ing job, Schnelker will be the offensive coach. I mean, no question about that. No question about that. Now, I don't like to name names after a f***ing game, but we can't be responsible for the blocking. We can't be responsible for the guys jumping offside. We can't be responsible for. We get down there and it was a dumb play by Anderson. I love Anderson, but it was a dumb play when his foot was shoe was coming off up the line screen. We were hollering take time out. We had a trap play called, and his shoe comes off. That ain't Bob Schnelker's fault. We have another trap play, and if Finney picks up his feet, he walks in. We got in the pass to AC out there in the flat. The ball's thrown in low. That isn't Schnelker's fault. We got right down there. We got the second down, and I don't know what the hell. 2 yards ago, I don't know what 15, 40, whatever the hell it was, and Irwin jumps offside.
Did you win this game?
I think we did, yeah.
But the best one was not caught on video. The best Jerry Burns moment was after they clinched in 1987, and they clinched by backing into the playoffs. Right. At least I said it was backing in. Burnsy disagreed. But the St. Louis Cardinals, they were still the St. Louis Cardinals at the time, they, before they went to Arizona, they had lost, and it allowed the Vikings to get in. They had the real nice run through New Orleans and San Francisco. But that was the one which you may have heard on audio where he went off about Killer Instinct. Because I asked him about Killer Instinct, and there were 3 buttons Jerry Burns had if you wanted to push him for a story. Killer Instinct, Herschel Walker, and quarterback controversy. But the Killer Instinct one, the one that was so memorable about it, he's just going on and on about Killer Instinct, Killer Instinct. And he goes, "There, start that Killer Instinct." And I said, "I think it was Charles Manson." "Yeah, Manson." He had no idea who it was. Then he just went on another tirade. So, but he was a delight then to deal with, and he's a delight now because I've talked to him occasionally. We've had him on 105 The Ticket. He's a great character, and I think he was greatly underrated as a coach. He was doing things that later Joe Gibbs got credit for, right, being the innovator of, but Jerry was a great offensive mind.
It's funny that you say that. We've actually asked some of our guests before, was this really the Midwest Coast offense that he started with Fran Tarkenton and Chuck Foreman in the short passing game? And all will say, yeah, we were doing that long before you ever saw it in San Francisco.
Well, it wasn't just San Francisco, though. There were things Gibbs did that Burnsy did long before he used the tight end. He did things that other coaches have made. And Walsh is, frankly, you're right. It is, he did things Walsh did. He did things Gibbs did, and they both had different styles. The point is he tried everything and did everything if he thought it could work. Yeah. He never got pigeonholed into a certain type of offense.
Well, we get to find out a little bit about the new head coach, Mike Zimmer, and I know you've talked to him before. What do you think he brings to the team that'll help us improve in 2014?
You know what we keep hearing, I read a lot about him. I did as much research as I could. And the thing that stuck out to me is everyone hears that, if they haven't, they will, the Hard Knocks clip where he's profane and he's yelling at someone. And he does that, or he did that. The difference with him and a lot of coaches and also a lot of managers in corporate life and business, he will get on you if you do something wrong, but he also will praise you if you do something right. That's the part that's left out by a lot of coaches and by a lot of people that, in the corporate world and the business world. They'll just yell. They won't also pat you on the back. And I think that is the reason, well, I know that's the reason that so many of his players respect and like him, because they know they're going to get balanced. They know when they do something right, he will note it, and they know when they do something wrong, he's going to note that too. And I really think that's what set him apart and has made him so popular with, with players and frankly with people in his office. He had said when he was on 105 The Ticket Friday with us that people even said to him, we don't know if when you walk down the hall if you'd yell at secretaries. That was a joke, but that's the perception people have. And he had said, the woman that was his assistant in Cincinnati, she was in tears when she heard he was leaving because he was so well liked and in some ways so beloved by people he worked with.
Yeah, and you hear about the potential harsh personality he's got. We talked to Scotty Graham the other day, and he knows him. He said, strangely enough, he's a player's coach, and because exactly what you said, it's he will give you the feedback, he'll be straight up with you, but you'll win together and you'll lose together, and you'll stay together as a team.
Well, and that is absolutely right. And the thing about it that's funny, too, somebody said at the news conference on Friday, they asked him, you have a reputation as no-nonsense coach, and he actually made light of it and said, well, I'm being nonsense now. I was the only one who laughed because I don't think people know quite how to take him. He does have a sense of humor, but no one expects it to come out. It's kind of like with Childress. No one expected him to have a sense of humor, so when he said something that truly was funny, it kind of made a thud because nobody knew how to react to that. Yeah. They expected something completely different.
One of the first things Mike Zimmer said he would do is he would adjust his schemes based on the talent of the team. And, Bob, why do you think Leslie Frazier seemed to stubbornly stick to one scheme-fits-all approach on defense?
That is a great question, but he was a 4-3 guy. I never really saw him going to a 3-4. And frankly, let's talk about this year. They put themselves in the deep stuff when they didn't figure out a way or try to re-sign Antoine Winfield. He was coming off a decent year, but more importantly, he was a leader of that secondary, and they lacked leadership in the secondary. They really, as the season went on, it was clear how valuable he was to that team. And frankly, this is going to be something that I think that Zimmer has to be aware of. The leadership that Kevin Williams and Jared Allen provide to that defense, or provided, can Chad Greenway and Brian Robinson step into that void? Because those are the two most veteran guys on that defense, and that's something I think they have to be very, very aware of. Should they put out the money and attempt to get, if any of them, maybe just Williams, if you can't afford Jared Allen. Williams, I think, can be had for a decent amount, where Allen certainly can go for more. He's younger, and he's still, despite not having great numbers, I still think he can play and contribute, and I still think Williams can too. But it's something they have to be real careful of, is not let go of all these veterans who can offer leadership.
Do you think if Jared Allen does go, and it sure looks like he's headed that way, that they will re-sign Everson Griffin? And what do you think about Sharif Floyd? Is he ready to step in?
Well, if he's ready or not, he's going to have to step in.
Right.
I don't think there's much doubt about that. And if they don't re-sign Griffin, who's their other defensive end? Floyd's a defensive tackle. Do you move him, or do you draft a young kid and try to put him there? That's the problem that they have. I think that Griffin is certainly on their radar, because I don't know how many teams are going to go after him hard. He really doesn't have a body of work to say, well, he's worth spending, making him one of the top-paid free agents or paying really good money for him. We'd never be one of the top-paid, but some teams have done it, but he doesn't have. There's nothing really there that says we got to spend big money on this guy. You're taking a chance on potential. That's why I think he'd wind up. He'll be back with the Vikings, but I still would, if I were them, I would let guys who are not helping you or are marginal or mostly special team players go to try to keep Jared Allen and Kevin Williams.
Well, speaking of marginal players, do you think a coaching change is going to change the style of Chris Cook, or has he put on his purple uniform for the last time?
Frankly, I just wrote something that is going to appear as one of my blogs. If I were the Vikings, I would not count on Chris Cook. I would go out and I'd use that first-round pick on Cleve Denard from Michigan State, because he's a kick-ass cover corner. And I think Xavier Rhodes, in the last few games before he got hurt, he played very well. He was not the same player he was when the season began, and he's got size, and he was handling himself quite well against some of the best receivers in the game. And when you say the best receivers in the game, and you're talking about some of the best receivers in the NFC North, because no division has receivers the way the North does. And that's what you have to have. That's why you need top corners. And Denard is he's a really good cover guy, and I would wait until the second round to go after the quarterback. And as I wrote and mentioned, the guy I think that they should really look hard at is Jimmy Garoppolo, and not just because we share the same Italian heritage. I just think this kid could be terrific. Over 5,000 yards, 53 touchdowns, shattered Tony Romo's records at Eastern Illinois. He needs some time, but if you wind up keeping Matt Castle for a year, or if there's another veteran they think is terrific, bring him in and just groom him and not throw him right in, I think that he could turn out to be a really good quarterback for him. And keep in mind, the Italians in the NFL have not done bad at quarterback. Joe Montana and Dan Marino did all right for themselves. Montana's maternal grandparents they actually came from Sicily. They're both as Italian as you can get.
as long as whoever we bring in can throw past the first down markers, that'll be a nice change of pace. And I've heard stories out of the Senior Bowl that a lot of the quarterbacks don't look so good, but Garoppolo's the one they said has been making adjustments and seems to be very coachable to where he needs to be.
Well, he was the MVP of the East-West Shrine game. The one thing that, from the little scenario I just put out there, is if he has a great Senior Bowl and he scores really well at the Combine, his stock is going to go up. And he may, right now, he probably still would be there. He's a top. I looked at one of the charts. I think he's at number 50. He's in the top 50, but certainly where they're picking, he would be available to more. They could move things around. I just don't think, if you're picking number 8, to me, there's no great quarterback. I happen to think Manziel is the best of the bunch because he's just electrifying. But none of the other ones are. There's no Andrew Luck or nothing close to that in this draft. To me, there's a lot of guys that you're going to take a chance on. And frankly, if you're taking a chance, I would rather take a chance in the second round than with that first round pick.
And do you think with all the heat that's going to be on Rick Spielman to pick a quarterback, if the right guy's not there in the first round, do you think he'll wait to the second round, or do you think he'll reach?
Well, that's a problem because he does feel a lot of pressure about the quarterback. But let's hope that Zimmer, for the sake of the Vikings, has some influence on him. And, let me ask you that question. What would you think would be a better thing, get a cornerback or help to shore up the defense, or go for a quarterback, which I think just about any quarterback, you're Blake Bortles, and maybe he'll be there, or, maybe Teddy Bridgewater can slide to 8. I don't think either one of them would. Even if they did, I don't know that I would jump on them because, again, I'm not sold on either of them being exceptional. So I would wait and get the best defensive player that can help you. And I happen to think that it's Bernard, who is, in most of the player ratings, he's in the top 10.
Yeah.
Now, I've looked at one of them where he was 10th. I don't think it's a reach if you're picking 8th and you take the 10th best player, or the guy regarded as 10th best player, by any means.
To answer your question, during the season when you struggled through the quarterback issues, you desperately wanted a quarterback, but realistically, had we had a defense ranked even in the mid-tiers, this is probably not a 5-10-1 team. It's probably at least 8-8 at this point in time. So, unfortunately, we have problems in both areas. Probably the defense is worse, like you said.
Well, my feeling is if they had stuck with Matt Castle after the Pittsburgh game, now they did them, they had to give him a start against Carolina, and they gave up on that, on him after that. But if they had let Castle alone, and if they had kept Winfield, maybe even not kept Winfield, I think the Vikings could have had an opportunity. They would have won the division. I think Castle would have developed and been fine. There certainly would have been games he would have struggled in, but that jerking the quarterback in and out, and the ridiculous thing they did with Josh Freeman in New York, that was a crusher for them. This team could have done so much better than it did, and I'm sure you've talked about it with people, why they waited so long with Cordero Patterson to get him more involved. Now, they could argue, or you could argue, that he wasn't ready, but accelerate the curve for him by getting him in and giving him opportunities. It didn't make sense, particularly when we saw how he just burst when they finally gave him a chance.
I agree. And you mentioned Matt Castle. Do you think there's a risk that he opts out of his contract and doesn't return, or do you think he's excited about the new staff being in there?
Frankly, I think when he's done talking to Zimmer and Turner, and look, he's going to have an opportunity to work with a very good offensive coordinator. Norv Turner did not excel as a head coach, but he's got a great reputation and dealing with quarterbacks, too, as a coordinator. I mean, look what he did, frankly. Look what he did. He didn't do such a bad job with the quarterbacks he had in Cleveland, which was a mess. So I think Castle will want to stick around because I think Zimmer and Turner will generate the kind of excitement that would make him want to stay. And frankly, where's he going to go? Nobody is going to say, you're a starting quarterback. He'd be going as a backup somewhere else, where here, the likelihood is he will be the starting quarterback.
And do you think from a Christian Ponder standpoint, with Rick Spielman coming out and saying what he did in the press about getting the quarterback position straightened out, have we given up on Christian Ponder, or is there a chance we see him again in 2014?
I would not be surprised with anything Spielman would do, but I would be wrong to bring him back again and bring back, with Castle and the whole Josh Freeman thing. It's hard to imagine that Freeman will want to come here unless he just wants to keep catching checks, because they certainly gave him a lot of money to do nothing. But if it were me and I were calling the shots, I would keep Castle and I'd let the other two go, and then find get a young quarterback. And frankly, I wouldn't have trouble getting another young quarterback too. Get two of them and get one in the later rounds if there's one sitting there. When you're drafting 6th or 7th round, just to have another young guy you can make your practice squad and maybe a third quarterback.
Yeah, very much like what Washington did when they took Kirk Cousins after they took RG3.
Yeah, Cousins, yep. If there's somebody good you like, why not?
Yeah, and maybe you can settle a long-time argument we've had on VikeFans.com about Ponder. Some people say he's got the talent, but his confidence has been shot by the coaching. And then others we talk to say, this is pretty much the same Christian Ponder we saw since he was drafted. What do you think is the truth?
I think the truth is that he's one of the brightest quarterbacks in the league, but I qualify that by saying book smart. He certainly is a bright kid. But you've seen him. We've all seen him. He can't find another receiver. He locks into a guy. When you watch him and then you watch Peyton Manning, how quickly Manning gets rid of the ball. He sees things that, what it's almost like? It's like, have you ever watched Iron Man?
Oh,
when
sure.
you show where he's looking behind his mask and everything is there, where it's all digital and he zeroes in on something.
Right.
That's what Peyton Manning can do. Maybe the best way to put it is Christian Ponder's playing without the Iron Man mask. He's not seeing anything. And I think that's the problem. And what helped him get drafted by the Vikings was Rick Spielman gave him a battery of tests, including the test they give the Navy SEALs, and he did very well on it. He scored up where the Mannings have scored and where Drew Brees scored on that type of test, but the thing that's missing is his ability to recognize whether a guy's open or not and making the decision to go to him when he's supposed to go to him. And the other thing, if you needed to know nothing more, watch him throw that Hail Mary attempt that fell way short of his receivers. He doesn't have the arm.
You kind of had a split faction, but I think most people are coming to the agreement that that's true and it's time to move on. But as you look at the new offense under certainly a qualified coordinator in Norv Turner, do you think that Norv will finally teach Adrian Peterson how to block and be an integral part of the receiving game so he doesn't have to leave the field on obvious passing downs?
On the first one, probably not, because I'm sure, believe me, the people that have been there have always tried to get him to block more. I think in Adrian's mind, he's a runner, and he is a runner, and a great runner. I think they may have gotten already as much as they can out of him as a receiver. I would leave him on the field, because you're not asking him to go downfield and catch long passes or even medium range, but I think they should get him more involved in the, on screens and in the flat. I've never quite understood why he has not his entire career had more screen passes thrown to him, because you're suddenly putting him basically in the open field against someone, and he can handle that. His hands are not. He doesn't have two cinder blocks for hands. They're not great hands, but I think they're adequate. It's a matter of a coach figuring out what works best for a player and lining him in the slot, and like some teams do with their running backs, or putting him at receiver. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to just get him where he's only facing. Well, he runs into the line and everyone's collapsing on him. You put him out in the flat or get him a screen, everyone's not going to collapse on him.
Yeah. Well, I hope they finally do it, because you're right. The few screen passes they've thrown to him, he seems to be successful. And, you think about the passing game. You mentioned Cordarrelle Patterson before. If he, in fact, does become a number one receiver, or at least a number two starter, can they afford to leave him back on kickoff returns?
A lot of people have issues with that. I think as time goes on, if he becomes that type of player, he may be used the way that Anthony Carter was used by Jerry Burns. Burnsy held him for the playoffs and huge games, where if you need a big return, you put him back there. How often have we seen, my mind may have gone blank, but I'm trying to think how often we see kickoff returners suffering a major injury. Now, right now, none come to mind. There could be an obvious one I'm just not thinking of, but I don't recall it happening or seeing it happen that much. If you're durable, you're durable. Now, that said, Percy Harvin is a different type of guy, because he's so reckless, and he could get hurt on kickoff returns, because I don't think that Cordarrelle Patterson is as reckless when he returns. He just has blazing speed and can get after it. And I would, frankly, if I had the opportunity to use him, I would take advantage of that. It's sort of like the attitude of what Jerry Burns did with, he always had Joey Browner on his coverage teams, because he knew if everyone else missed, Joey would get him. Well, you're certainly putting Joey Browner, you were exposing him to a potential injury on special teams, but I just think you put your best guys there, because he has proven how valuable he is, and he's a game changer and a game breaker as a kickoff returner. And I don't know why you'd want to give up that opportunity to have that. He could set your defense up at the 50 or closer, or spring it for a touchdown. It doesn't always have to be a touchdown if you're putting your team within a few yards of a field goal after a return.
If we give you the chance to be Rick Spielman for the offseason, what either players or positions would you target in free agency, Bob?
I would make my two free agents that are coming up if I were the GM. I would make Jaron Allen and Kevin Williams my priorities to get them re-signed. I would also be looking to shore up the linebacker position because I do like Greenway. There's too many ifs related to the linebackers. I happen to think Mouty could play and start from, Gerald Hodges. They need stronger looks and better looks, and I think they'll get them under Zimmer. He's the type of guy that could turn them into something, but I'd have to make that decision first. I also think they may have to be looking now for another tight end. Kyle Rudolph will be fine, but John Carlson, with the concussion, they don't know what's going to happen there. And while they got decent play from the younger tight ends, I still want to look to shore that up. And frankly, I certainly think, that wide receiver is still a position that they could look at, and the secondary for sure. Anything you can do to make that cornerback position. Frankly, I said Marquise Denard from Michigan State. Well, in passing situations, which you're in a lot in the NFC North, you're going to be needing more than just two good corners. You're going to need a third and sometimes a fourth because somebody's going to go down. And I'm not really sold on, maybe Sendejo can go with Harrison Smith in the secondary as your other safety, but I'd be looking to shore up the secondary too. And I certainly want to find a nose tackle that's just a beast. And frankly, I wouldn't hesitate to use, not maybe every down, but I would use Kevin Williams if I re-signed him at nose tackle. He was terrific when they put him at the nose late in the season.
He really was, and when you look at this, we have really not had a person in that role since Pat Williams left, so we absolutely need that, something terrible.
And frankly, Kevin Williams, like I said, he was awfully good. He doesn't want it, but, you tell, hey, you want to stick around here, we're going to use you here. And if nothing else, use him at, and sort of playing that role on passing situations, which he can really do some damage, and put the beefy guy in on run plays.
And you mentioned linebacker position, and Audie Cole came in towards the end of the season before he got injured and looked pretty good at the role. Was he really a potential heir apparent, or did he just look better than what we'd had with Henderson?
I see. That's one that I think he could play middle linebacker for him because he made things happen. E.J. Henderson could play middle linebacker. Aaron Henderson could not and will not because, frankly, it would be stunning to me if he was with this team when they started training camp. He's had too many personal issues with the DUIs, and frankly, I think that maybe he needs a break from football. That's or maybe football needs a break from him. One or the other. But I think he has some things he needs to straighten out in his personal life. And if you're a new coach coming in, you just want guys you can count on. How often do you hear of a guy that takes a weekend off from playing? There was that weekend where he just, after the first DUI, where he just didn't. I'm sure it was mutual with the team, but if you're a player, you fight to make sure you get back on that field, and that does not appear to be the case. And I don't know all of the factors involved, but it certainly didn't seem to be what was happening.
And never is a good sign when you get two DWIs in the course of 4 weeks.
Seldom.
Well, as we wrap up our conversation today, I'm curious, what are you hearing about the Chris Cluey investigation?
I've talked to Chris, and we had him on 105 The Ticket, and he is adamant that everything that happened, he said happened, did indeed happen, and those comments were made. The one thing we don't, and I asked him about this question too, the context of them, and his comment was that the context didn't matter, they were said, but we don't know if there was a context. Now, the things that were said were, they should not have been said under any situation, which was Cluey's point, but I don't know how it's going to play out. The fact that the Vikings seem to be supporting Prefer, because there's, and I'm sure you've heard that they would like Zimmer to keep Prefer on the staff, means they have their support behind them and that they are trusting that whatever the version that Prefer gives is more believable than Cluey's. I wrote a blog about this for TwinCities.com. Problem with this is I like both. I like Cluey and I like Prefer. I know Cluey better than Prefer, but one of them is lying. And that's what these investigators are going to have to figure out, which one is. Somebody is saying that Prefer was emphatic that he never said those words, and Cluey is emphatic that he did. So somewhere, somebody's telling the truth, somebody's lying, and I don't know, I honestly don't know if the investigators will ever know for sure, because this is not a criminal case. Everyone that contacted these other players, they don't have to talk. They do not have to respond even to the phone calls if they don't want to. I'm following it with as much interest as you and a lot of other people in the media and Viking fans are.
Well, we'll certainly see how it shakes out. And, Bob, we want to thank you for taking the time to share your views on the team from a media perspective with the fans today, and hope we can invite you back to VikeFans.com again to talk as the new roster takes shape for 2014.
No, I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed talking to you, and also I'm going to go into shill mode here and tell everyone in the Twin Cities and make podcasts, too, to listen to 105 The Ticket simulcast on 105.1, 105.3, and 105.7, depending on where you are in the Twin Cities. But Mike Morris, it's great working with him. And we are very Vikings heavy, even in the off season, because frankly, it's what people want to talk about. This is a Viking community, as you well know, and it's a Viking state. Given the choice, they're going to hear about Vikings. Even in the off season, they'd rather hear about the Vikings than the Wolves or the Wild, and in many cases, even the Twins.
No doubt about it. And beyond just hearing, Bob and Mike on the radio, don't forget to check him out on his columns and his blogs and TwinCities.com. So again, Bob, I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate that.
Well, Tom, thanks so much, and it's been great. And honestly, I think you did a hell of a job when you ran that Colts offense as offensive coordinator. How often do people think do they confuse you with that Tom Moore?
It happened. People ask if he was a relative of mine. He used to be the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh back in the glory years of the 70s, and people asked me
then. And he was here, of course.
And I so badly wanted to say yes because they were winning, but unfortunately we're not related.
He was a great guy to deal with because he was with the Vikings. He also may have been the most imitated assistant coach. Because every quarterback, including Peyton Manning, can do a Tom Moore imitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been effective, and he's another guy who adjusts. Whatever the skills are of the player, he tends to adjust his offensive scheme.
Yeah, he was. But I'm every bit as impressed with you as I was with him.
Well, I appreciate it, Bob. And again, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule today.
My pleasure. All right, take care, Tom.